Great, great, great. So we are live. We're live right now. Beautiful, beautiful. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this Sunday, August 28th, as we continue on our second part of our discussion on Baha'i philosophy, an overview. This week's presenter is Mr. Mikhail Sergeyev, and he is a PhD in religious studies from Temple University, and he is a religion, philosophy, and modern art historian. He has served as an editor of the book series Contemporary Russian Philosophy at Brill Publishers in the Netherlands, and as chair of the Department of Religion, Philosophy, and Theology at the Wilmette Institute. For those of you who want to, of course, look at Wilmette Institute's courses, you can go to the Wilmette Institute website. It's a very, very good place to learn about different Baha'i topics and different subjects that people bring to teach there, and the courses are phenomenal. You can do them online. Mr. Sergeyev teaches courses in humanities at the University of the Arts, Philadelphia, and a graduate theological union. He is also an affiliate professor at the United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities in New Brighton, Minnesota. Sergeyev has also published more than 200 scholarly, literary, and journalistic articles in the United States, Canada, Great Britain, the Netherlands, Poland, Czech Republic, Greece, Slovakia, Russia, Japan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Azerbaijan. He is the author and contributing editor of 13 books, including Russian Philosophy in the 21st Century, an anthology. And you can go to his website, http://uarts.digication.com/m Sergeyev/. And further, the topic today is going to be talking about the book overview, Baha'i Theology and Philosophy, The World of the Baha'i Faith, edited by Robert Stockman. And this is published by Routledge in 2022. I really recommend you also refer to that book, as this is something you can become exposed to if you haven't already. And to purchase a copy of this full publication that we've just mentioned, you can also go to clearwaterbahais.org to visit Routledge's website link that we've provided, where you can buy The World of the Baha'i Faith, and that book is available for sale. Dr. Sergeyev, could you please clarify how people can find Baha'i theology and philosophy? Is that also available on Amazon for people who are looking?
Yes, it is available on Amazon. If you are referring to the chat question, yeah, I'm not sure whether this is the URL where you can find the book, or this is the URL of my site. Yes, you can find the book very easily if you Google Robert Stockman, World of the Baha'i Faith, and you will find it on Amazon and on other platforms. As for my personal site, you can Google my first and last name, and you will find it there. Yes, here it is.
And to spell it, it's Mikhail. That's his first name. And his last name, Sergeyev, is Sergeev.
Yeah, but I already see the link to the site in the chat room.
I repeated it for those that are on YouTube and Facebook who probably are not seeing anything we post here in the Zoom chat.
But that's fine. Go ahead and continue, because I'll have all these links attached to the video as well.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Appreciate it. So with that being said, we posted those links up here in the Zoom chat. Dr. Sturgev, if you could please continue your presentation. We appreciate your time and your effort having presented the first part, and we look forward to this next part from you. I believe you need to share your screen now, so we can begin.
Yes, thank you, John.
Sure. And we thank all of you who have joined us again for this next part of the presentation. We invite you, if you did not see the first part, and it's fine. If you did not see the first part, you can go to the YouTube channel or the Facebook page. On YouTube, this channel is Clearwater Bahais, and on Facebook, this is posted under the Baha'i Center of Clearwater. So you have, for Facebook, the Baha'i Center of Clearwater, and on YouTube, Clearwater Bahais. You can search for them in either place and you'll find them, knowing that some people avoid Facebook accounts. YouTube will be the easiest spot for you to find it. Clearwater Bahais is the username and the channel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys for the invitation. I just want to make sure that everything is well. So I'm sharing the screen, and you should see Baha'i philosophy and overview. It's fine.
Yes, we're on the title page. Yes.
Okay. And when I'm speaking, I do not see me, but hopefully the recorder will record me speaking, right?
Yes, we have you.
Okay, thank you. So today we are continuing my presentation, which is an overview of Baha'i philosophy, and the presentation is based on my article with the same title in the book, The World of Baha'i Faith, that was edited by Robert Stockman. So last time we talked about the following concepts. In part one, after a short introduction and general remarks, we talked about epistemology, ontology, and anthropology. Let me remind you that epistemology is the philosophical discipline that asks the question, how do we know? Ontology is a philosophical discipline that asks the question, what is real? And finally, anthropology is the philosophical discipline that asks the question, who am I? So now in the second part of the presentation, we are going to talk about prophetology. The main question of prophetology is, how is revelation possible? Then we will move on to historiosophy, or philosophy of history. Then we will talk about political philosophy and social philosophy. And finally, we will conclude with ethics and aesthetics, and my short conclusion to the overall presentation. So let us begin with prophetology. And as I said, the main question of prophetology is, how can revelation be possible? This question is never asked by modern Western philosophy, because modern Western philosophy is based on the assumption that there are several ways for humans to know things. And this is, first of all, sensory perception, and second, human rationality. But all other ways of cognition, namely intuitive knowledge, or knowledge by tradition, or knowledge by revelation, are not considered as valid in modern Western philosophy. So the question about how can revelation be possible is a question that was usually asked in medieval Christian Jewish, Christian, and Muslim philosophy. The question is also asked and should be asked in Baha'i philosophy, since Baha'i philosophy is based on scriptures, and scriptures are based on revelation. So there are three most common answers to this question. And I'm taking three major world religions: Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam. Buddhists focus on the human aspect of the founder of their religion, the Buddha. According to the early Buddhism, the Buddha is a natural but extraordinary human being. And by being extraordinary, Buddha was able to achieve spiritual enlightenment. Muslims, on the other hand, emphasize the intermediary role of the Prophet Muhammad between Allah, or God, and his people. For Muslims, Prophet Muhammad is not God, but he is the mediator. And finally, Christians assert the divinity of Jesus Christ as the perfect mediator between God and humanity. So here we have three various approaches to the issue of revelation: the human approach, the divine approach, and the intermediary approach. So when it comes to prophetology, Baha'i philosophy, as in many other areas and issues, presents the answer to this question that is comprehensive. According to the Baha'i teachings, the founders of great and independent religions, or manifestations of God, as Baha'i call them, have three stations. The first is the material station, and here we may remember Buddhists and their understanding of the Buddha. So the material station, having its origin in time, in this sense, the prophets are like all other human beings. The second station is represented by our rational soul, or the so-called human reality. The rational soul also has a beginning, and God's manifestations share it in common with all humanity. That may remind us of Muslims and their interpretation of the station of the Prophet Muhammad. He is a human being, but he is a human being that is an intermediary between God and the rest of humanity. And finally, the third station is that of divinity. That obviously reminds us of Christians and their interpretation of the nature of Jesus Christ, who, according to Christianity, is both the human being and the divine being. So while the souls of most human beings emanate from the Holy Spirit, according to Baha'i teachings, the souls of the chosen ones, meaning the manifestations of God, appear through the process of manifestation. The difference between emanation and manifestation is that emanation can be compared to the process of writing a novel, where the writer is God, and the rest of creation, including human beings, are simply part of the novel. While manifestation is a process that could be compared to the organic development from, let's say, being a seed to being a tree. The tree is actually the seed, because the seed potentially contains the tree, and the tree is the seed actualized. However, the seed and the tree are two different entities. So according to this view, the manifestations of God are different from the Holy Spirit, the power of the Holy Spirit, according to which they operate. However, they do manifest the Holy Spirit and the will of God similarly to how the tree manifests the seed from which it has grown. Now, Baha'is also believe in progressive revelation, the view that the manifestations of God and the religions they founded form a coherent and comprehensive plan that leads humanity to deeper levels of unity, love, and spiritual discovery. Sorry. The Baha'i faith is unique in this respect among world religions, and it ascribes the status of divine manifestations to such prominent religious figures as Abraham, Moses, Zoroaster, the founder of Zoroastrianism, Buddha, Krishna, the major figure in Hinduism, Jesus, Muhammad, and their own twin prophets, the Baba and Baha'u'llah. The manifestations of God, while not being identical with God himself, are the revealers of God's will, and as such are beyond any ordinances and prohibitions. Now, I would like to make a quick comment about this teaching that the manifestations of God are the revealers of God's will. It is very important. It is very important. Sorry. It is very important that we are talking about God's will, not God's nature. Baha'i teachings reject any forms of pantheism. And if we believe that this world was created from God's nature, we will come to the conclusion that this world is part of God. And that's what we discover in pantheistic or panentheistic teachings. If the world, the created world, was created from God's nature, it means that it shares the same nature with God. And that also means that this world is part of God. In various panentheistic systems, it is asserted that this world is to God like our physical body is to our soul. So I think that Baha'i teachings avoid the panentheistic view by saying that God creates the world from his will, not from his nature. And creation from will means that the creation itself is different in nature from the creator. Again, the metaphor is the writer creating the novel. So the writer creates the novel from his will, not from his nature. So he does not give birth. If the writer is a woman, for example, she does not give birth to a child. And this would be the creation from nature, generation. But instead, the author creates the novel from his or her will, and therefore the novel by nature is different from its creator. Now, let's move on to philosophy of history. Here at the outset, I would like also to make some comments, some general comments about various philosophies of history. Various cultures espouse diverse views on natural and human history. But if we approach this topic from the philosophical perspective, we will see that basically there are two basic approaches to human history. One is of a cycle, and another one is of a straight line. Most ancient cultures regard time and human history, which evolves in time, as cyclical. The ring or a snake eating its own tail serve as a symbol of such understanding of history that has neither beginning nor end, but only the eternal return. The Bible, which also comes down to us from antiquity, introduces an entirely different perspective on the evolution of the world and humanity. It talks about the so-called alpha point, the beginning point, of the creation ex nihilo, creation from nothing, and describes humanity as moving irreversibly to the last point, or the last judgment, or the apocalypse. The biblical idea of history as a straight line, by the way, was inherited by modern secular culture, which replaced the apocalypse with various utopian visions and became driven by the notion of linear progress. We all remember the optimistic slogan, the latest, the greatest. So in its philosophy of history, the Baha'i teachings, as always, accommodate both cyclical and linear approaches. So they present a comprehensive view to the philosophy of history. But by doing this, they also move significantly beyond this dichotomy and present a more complex and nuanced picture of history. Now, my second comment is about the difference between evolution and history, because when we are talking about human history, we have to consider the concept of human evolution. Baha'is believe in the divine origin and driving force behind human evolution. And they also believe that human evolution is striving towards a certain goal that is preordained by God and is present potentially even before the appearance of human species on the earthly globe. According to the Baha'i views about Darwin and his theory of evolution, it is true only regarding the material constitution of humanity, which shares common ancestry with all living creatures. However, the spiritual essence of humans, their eternal soul, is fundamentally different, according to Baha'i teachings, from the spirit that animates the animal kingdom. So no matter how long and no matter how hard the animals will try to evolve, they will never evolve spiritually to the human level. So what is the difference between evolution and history? The difference between evolution and history is that evolution follows the inner laws of nature, while the human history is driven by the outside forces of revelation. Human history is cyclical. Cycles are inaugurated, concluded, and renewed until a universal cycle is completed. So Baha'i teachings do incorporate the cyclical view of human history, but they have their own understanding of those cycles. So for example, what Abdul Baha calls a universal cycle may run for thousands or even millions of years, and it comprises countless ages and epochs, eras, and Abdul Baha says that now we are in the cycle which started with Adam, and Baha'u'llah is the universal manifestation of that cycle. Overall, Baha'i vision of history is fourfold. Number one, human history is divine in origin. Number two, human history has a purpose. Number three, human history consists of upward spiral cycles. And number four, human history will never end. It will last forever. So the present historical period is the age of transition from the stage of social infancy toward its collective maturity. That is also part of the Baha'i teachings about our present condition and our present situation in history. It is part of the Baha'i vision that this social infancy will finally culminate in human collective maturity. Now let's move on to political thought. The philosophy of politics examines various types of governments and asserts which ones are the most effective and humane ways to organize society. So here we have the founding figures of the Baha'i faith, who in their writings unequivocally stand on the side of constitutional government and the rule of law. In many of his tablets, Baha'u'llah denounces tyranny and absolutism, while approving of consultative assemblies that give voice to in state affairs to the people. Baha'u'llah instructs his followers to obey their kings and governments. Baha'is are encouraged to participate in public affairs and especially to promote their social causes, such as racial and gender equality, interreligious dialogue, economic justice, and so on. They are advised to vote their conscience, but are not allowed to be members of any political party in order to avoid the conflict and contention that are embedded in contemporary democratic political systems. Abdul Baha, in his writings, also says that the government officials should be enlightened by religion, while the teachers of faith should concern themselves with the spiritual education of the people. So here we are talking about the separation between religion and state, which is defended by Abdul Baha here. However, in the future, Baha'is envision a state of affairs that may prove or not prove to be different. In the future, Baha'is envision the establishment of the lesser peace and the most great peace. And let me actually focus on these two concepts. The lesser peace, the establishment of the lesser peace, means the establishment of a global commonwealth of nations where international conflicts and wars hopefully could be prevented by an international and independent supreme tribunal. So in other words, what Baha'is mean by lesser peace is the political unity, political and social unity of humanity on the planet that would make war not useful as the instrument of international politics. So lesser peace is an external unity, is the unity by convenience. The most great peace, on the other hand, is the ideal of unity, is the vision of unity that is more of an internal unity than an external unity. I would usually give an example of marriage. You can have a marriage of convenience and you can have a marriage of love. So the lesser unity is like a marriage of convenience. You know, it's better. It's better to live this way. But the most great peace is like the marriage of love, when two people are united internally by the feeling of mutual love and respect. So Baha'is believe that in the process of spiritualization, humanity will eventually achieve the most great peace when the Baha'i supreme governing body, the Universal House of Justice, may be involved in some governmental affairs. So let me emphasize those words, may and some. May be involved in some governmental affairs. The Baha'i teachings are not precise about what will or may happen, you know, in 500 years from now. But we know that the main purpose of the Universal House of Justice is to help the poor, to educate children, to protect the faith, etc. And this may be part of its governmental affairs: medicine, education, charity, protection, of the faith, etc. So we do not know what exactly will happen in 500 years. The teaching is open. And therefore, that's all I can say in this respect. Now, before we move on to social philosophy, let me ask whether anyone has questions. I remember that in part one of my presentation, we did this from time to time in order not to leave all the questions until the end of the presentation. So do we have any questions at this time?
There is a question that was placed in the chat, if you would like to read it.
Okay, let me see. Does history exist before consciousness? Is that the question?
That is the question, yes.
Lodro Seating is asking, does history exist before consciousness? Or to put it in physical terms, does history exist before measurement? The answer scientifically to the last question is that it does not. So what might this mean in terms of the Baha'i understanding of history? What about local houses of justice when they do be involved in governmental affairs? So these are two questions, actually. One question is about the idea of history. Another question is about political philosophy. So let me first address the first question. Thank you, Lodra, for your questions. So I don't think that history, properly speaking, can start before consciousness. Because in this case, we are not talking about history, we are talking about evolution. That was exactly my point. So history, human history, is driven not from the inside, but from the outside. And human history is driven by revelation. Revelation, now the question is revelation possible without consciousness? Of course not. Is revelation possible without self-consciousness? I don't think so. But the next interesting question would be, is revelation possible without language? Baha'u'llah tells us, I do not recall the exact place, I think it's in Gleanings. He tells us that before the languages we use now, there were other systems of communication. We do not know what kind of systems of communication. But I think history is not possible without some kind of system of communication. Again, because history is different from evolution by being driven from the outside. Now, the second question, what about local houses of justice when they do be involved in governmental affairs? I think that this question is open, and it depends on how history will develop in various countries. Now, Baha'is do have three levels of community governance: local houses of justice, national houses of justice, and the universal house of justice. Well, today, local and national are called spiritual assemblies. Now, Baha'is are also advised, and actually are taught, not to intervene in politics, especially when they are the minority within a given community. So it will all depend, I think, on the development of particular localities in terms of Baha'i membership. In my book about the theory of religious cycles that was published in Brill in 2015, I distinguish 5 basic types of possible correlation between religion and state in the future. The first one is the separation of religion and state that we have, let's say, in the United States. When Baha'is are in the minority, either in a locality or in a country or worldwide, we are told to honor this system, the separation of religion and state, even the disestablishment of any religion from state, like we have in the United States. Now, the second possible solution to the issue of religion and state would be that the religion, let's say the Baha'i religion in this case, becomes the state religion or one of the state religions of any state. You know, there are some countries where there are more than one religion that are sponsored by the state. The next possible solution to this issue is when, let's say, Baha'i faith enjoys at least 50% membership in a given country, for example, and it is recognized as an influential religion. A religion is still separated from the state, but I would call this arrangement a ceremonial model. It's like contemporary constitutional monarchy in Great Britain. So there is the queen. Let's say instead of the queen, we have the National Spiritual Assembly. But it has no serious and real power in politics. It has some ceremonial power, like the queen, who has to approve, for example, the next prime minister in England and things like that. Ceremonial power, in which the National House of Justice may do what it's supposed to do, namely protect and propagate the faith, take care of the poor, take care of the education and things like that, and promote charitable causes. So then let us suppose that in some countries or in some localities, we have 75% of Baha'i membership. It's not an overwhelming majority, but it is a majority already. Then we may think of a different model. I call it checks and balances model. So by checks and balances, I mean that the houses of justice, either on local, well, I don't think local, because local houses of justice are operating in localities, and localities do not have the laws and other ways to organize a country. Like localities do not print money, for example. Localities usually do not have other governmental duties, etc. So let's talk about the national level. So 75% are Baha'is in one given country, and the checks and balances system may, let's say, may function like this. The National House of Justice is part of the governmental structure, but it does not have the full power, and the power is divided between the House of Justice and the Parliament, depending upon the arrangement, the particular arrangement between the executive branch and the judicial branch and the lawmakers. And then the fifth model is when, you know, the overwhelming majority of Baha'is in any given locality or on a national level, let's say, constitute 95% of the population. Personally, I don't think that this will happen. But we have to see, and we are not going to see that So in 200, 300, 400 years, other Baha'is will see what this will involve and what kind of political arrangement they may come up with. Personally, my personal view is that the best model is the ceremonial model. It is not complete separation, but it is not a complete merger. The Baha'i institutions may have some ceremonial power, and that will serve as the standard for people in a given country, because I think it's very important to have some standards, including religious standards. But the National House of Justice in this case may limit its activity to, as I said, charitable causes, education, help to the elderly, help to the poor, those things that religion is always doing, and those things in which religion actually is the best. So I hope I responded at least partially to those questions. And if we have no other questions, I don't see any in the chat room. I'm moving on to social philosophy. Before I talk about Baha'i social philosophy, let me say a couple of words about religions in general. Every religion has a key term that is exclusively associated with its core teachings. In Christianity, it is the notion of universal love. In Buddhism, it is the concept of no self or selflessness. The central concept of the Baha'i faith, as we all know, is the idea of unity or oneness. Baha'is distinguish three levels of unity: the unity of God, the unity of religion, and the unity of humanity. According to Baha'i views, our Creator is one, and the purpose of religion, which is also essentially one, but progressing, is to bring people together. Primal religions unify families and clans into tribes. National religions of Judaism and Hinduism unite tribes into nations. International religions, such as Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam, provided their followers a spiritual identity that transcended the ethnic, national, or regional borders. And it has come a time, Baha'u'llah says, when humanity has to be integrated on a global scale. So the social dimension of Baha'i ethical teachings, therefore, is unique and of primary importance for the believers. It includes 11 principles that aim at guiding humanity toward planetary unity. Those 11 principles are well known by Baha'is. Let me just read them one by one. So the first principle is the principle of the independent investigation of truth, or independent search for truth. I think it is very important that Abdul Baha, when discussing those principles, is putting this principle as number one. I know of no religion that explicitly is telling its followers to search independently for truth. Yes, there were some parts in Hinduism, in the Upanishads, in the Hindu religion, when we read about the so-called two ways, the ways of the ancestors and the way of the gods. The way of the ancestors, according to the Hindu Upanishads, would be to imitate your ancestors and to basically follow their religion. But the path of the God would be to think critically for yourself, replace ignorance with wisdom, and find salvation. So I think this distinction between the way of the gods and the way of the ancestors echoes the Baha'i principle of the independent search for truth. Still, the Baha'i religion is the only one that explicitly tells its followers, again, to have critical mind and to search independently for truth, including religious truth. The second principle is the unity of humankind, meaning the global unity of humankind. The third principle, religion should be the source of love and affection. So the purpose of religion is to unify people, to bring love and joy. And as Abdul Baha says, I do not recall the exact place. Again, you can find all those quotations in my article. So Abdul Baha says in one place that if your religion does not bring joy and happiness to people, but brings, I don't know, terrorism, terror and killing, etc., it is better to leave this religion. And leaving that kind of religion would be a truly religious act. The fourth principle, the unity of science and religion. Now, the unity of science and religion is a broad principle that can be interpreted in various ways. I don't think Baha'is interpret this principle in a way that science and religion are the same thing. No, they are not. Religion is not science, and neither is philosophy, by the way, nor is philosophy. Philosophy is not science, as I said in the beginning of my presentation. And it is our modern tendency to view everything from the scientific perspective. Science is a very important part of human development, and it is attractive to humans because it gives us universal knowledge. However, science is not the only way to investigate and explore the world. There are other ways to do that. Through religion, through philosophical discoveries, through artistic, let's say, artistic creations, etc. But I think what is meant by the unity of science and religion is that both science, religion, and philosophy and art are about the same world. And this world was created by God. So therefore, science and religion in principle cannot disagree. They simply see the same world or the same elephant from different perspectives. The fifth principle is the elimination of prejudices of religion, race, and sect. The sixth principle is equal opportunity of the means of existence. Here, Abdul Baha is not talking about socialism, he's not talking about the redistribution of wealth, he's not talking about equality, because he says that humans are different, humans are ranked by nature, humans have different inclinations and interests, and therefore we cannot have a society of people who would have the same wealth, for example, or who would have the same desires and intentions. So therefore, Abdul Baha is talking here not about the elimination of inequality. He's talking about the elimination of extremes of wealth and poverty, which is very different from the socialist idea of complete equality. This is, I think, very important to understand. The seventh principle is equality of all before the law. Again, equality here is not about human equality. Humans are not equal to each other. We all are different. However, no matter our differences, no matter our social status, we should all be equal before the law. Now, principle number 8, the establishment of universal peace. Here, I think we are talking about the lesser peace, the marriage of convenience, political unification, which would result, hopefully, with the possibility to avoid wars. Number 9, non-interference of religion and politics. This is a very important principle, whether we understand it as total separation or whether we understand it as not so total separation. As I said, I believe that under certain conditions, the arrangement, the cooperation between the local national houses of justice and local national governmental bodies may be different from complete separation. But still, religion should not interfere, should not have power, especially absolute power, over politics. I think this principle is very important because the main purpose of religion is about enlightening people, spiritualizing people, encouraging people to be moral, helping those who are in need, the poor, the elderly, educate the children, and be involved in charitable causes. Number 10, a very important principle of equality of men and women. Again, here we are not talking about complete equality because biologically speaking, men and women are different, but we are talking about equality before the law and equality of opportunities. And finally, number 11, progress by the power of the Holy Spirit. That reminds me of the 6th fundamental of Islam, which says that, we do our best, but the outcome of events depends on the divine power. In other words, the Holy Spirit is the ultimate instrument of assuring our progress. Now, let me move on. So I think I will finish my presentation because we don't have much. And after that, we will move on to Q&A session.
All right. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Hold on a second. Yeah, I'm not done yet. Just 5 more minutes talking about ethics and aesthetics. So now let's talk briefly about ethics. Ethics is a philosophical discipline that investigates the moral principles that guide human behavior. Baha'i ethics, like any other religious ethical system, claims to have a divine origin and foundation. It is also a virtue ethics, that is, the accumulation of virtues or perfections represents the highest moral aspiration for the believers. The Baha'i writings assert the reality of human free will in the moral sphere, but deny the substantiality of evil, whose existence is relative. So the issue of free will is of greatest importance when we talk about ethics, because if we deny human free will, therefore we deny human responsibility for our actions. And if we have no responsibility for our actions, therefore we have no ethical standards for ethical behavior. So it is very important that Baha'i writings assert the reality of free will, especially in the moral sphere. Abdul Baha says that human free will is limited in many ways. For example, we are subject to sleeping, eating. We cannot survive without sleep, without eating, without drinking. For example, our free will is limited by our scientific and technological developments. For example, I do have a free will to fly to Mars, but I do not have the means to do that, or to the sun. But in the moral sphere, Abdul Baha says, human will is completely free, not limited by anything or by anyone. In addition to that, as I said, Baha'i teachings deny the substantiality of evil. What does this mean? It means, I think, that Baha'i teachings deny the existence of any being who could rival God. So I think this is basically a conclusion from the monotheistic premises of the Baha'i faith. If God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and omnibenevolent, then there could be no such being who could rival God in any of the aspects of God's power, knowledge, or goodness. In other words, Baha'is reject the existence of Satan or the devil or the Antichrist, etc., etc. Of course, there are evil people, meaning that people who are doing evil, serial killers, for example. But this does not mean that this evil is their substance. Now, according to Baha'i teachings, human nature is twofold and includes both spiritual and material elements. It is good by itself, but is fraught with evil because of the opposition between spirit and matter. So my physical body is perfect when it comes to material level of existence. And my spirit is perfect when it comes to the spiritual level of existence. But there is a tension, constant tension between my physical state of existence and my physical desires and my spiritual state of existence and my spiritual intentions. So evil here is not substantial, but is simply derived from this opposition between spirit and matter. Baha'i scriptures affirm the belief in God as the source of moral virtues. And Baha'u'llah instructs people to practice moderation and develop a good character. I looked at different virtues that are mentioned in Baha'i scriptures, and I think, well, I try to find some key virtues that are of most importance, should be of most importance for Baha'is. And this is my choice. The first one is moderation. And this virtue is mentioned practically in all cultures and all religions. You know, Buddhism, which is the middle way, and Confucius, who is talking about moderation, etc. Baha'u'llah actually makes some interesting spin to the idea of moderation. He says that moderation is important in all aspects of human life, including the good aspects, because sometimes if you are too good, that may lead to certain things that would not be as good as you would like it to be. For example, he talks about civilization. Civilization is a good thing and is the ultimate product of human development here on earth. And yet Baha'u'llah says that civilization needs moderation as well, that too much of civilization would lead to some evil results. So moderation, then good character, generally speaking. And when it comes to good character, Baha'u'llah admonishes his followers, and I quote here, to fix their gaze under all conditions upon justice and fairness, and praises trustworthiness as the greatest portal leading unto the tranquility and security of the people. So to sum up, moderation, justice, fairness, and trustworthiness. And now a couple of words about aesthetics. Aesthetics is the philosophical discipline that is devoted to the study of beauty and its expression and application in the arts. The Baha'i teachings regard arts and sciences at high esteem. And I quote here, but such arts and sciences as are useful and would redound to the progress and advancement of the people. This is from Gleanings. Of all the arts, Baha'u'llah, one of whose names is the blessed beauty, especially distinguishes music. So in conclusion, the Baha'i faith is a modern religion that offers a systematic philosophical outlook which is deeply rooted in biblical monotheism and represents a unique blend of Western and Eastern spirituality. And having incorporated a technical philosophical vocabulary into its scriptural texts, the Baha'i teachings possess high potential for developing innovative scriptural philosophy in the future. Thank you very much. And now we can move to questions and answers session. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this presentation and going through all these topics and coming for a second part to finish it. We appreciate that. There were some points you brought up about some principles about the Baha'i faith, and there are two questions. I'll start with the first, where you spoke about this economic system that the Baha'i faith promotes, not necessarily a redistribution of wealth, and nor does it promote, of course, the status quo, but it provides for a new system that completely reevaluates what an economy would look like. And I have a question about this concept of a meritocracy, where different people who perform different functions are given according to the merits of what they provide. How would an economic system allow for the effective functioning to distribute resources to those who need it to perform needs that are valued by society, and not provide those same resources to people that are hypothetically not deemed to need those resources as much? How does a system like that continue? For example, in the United States, we have controls over who can get access to certain materials. Even if you're allowed to have money, you're not allowed to have the certain things that money would buy if it was authorized by the system versus what money would buy in not authorized means. So an example would be controlled substances in the United States. We're talking about some things that could be used to form like a nuclear reactor, or some things that could be used to form, sadly, an EMP that would, again, destroy the very vitals of society and how they function right now. But at the same time, scientific research requires that we study these things so then we can grow beyond the limits that we are at right now. So therefore, you'll find purchases that are made under the auspices of university funds that are, of course, limited to what the university deems important and what it doesn't deem important, what society in general through donations deems important or doesn't deem important, be it through private individuals funding scientific research in a university setting, or be it through budgets through the public funds. Again, all of that being through the limited scope of the understanding of those who are listening to someone who may have a case to build something, who's able to advocate for it, versus someone who may be very smart, able to do a lot of things, but can't advocate for it. How do we see this wealth being put to use where it benefits humanity? And there are, of course, adequate controls, but at the same time, there are not too many where it stops progress, as we've seen in various countries, in various situations across the globe, just over the past 2 centuries even.
Look, a very short answer to this question, I have no idea. I'm not an economist. I cannot speak for economists. Now, from what I know, the prevalent idea about creating a good economy is to organize a free market. So far, I may be wrong, but so far, the idea of free market economy stands in modern Western countries. How to change it, whether it should be changed, whether it should be adjusted, etc., I do not know. I think economists should develop this. And my general rule is that until you develop something that is definitely better than you have now, it's good not to change what you already have. That is the basic principle of progressing. Number one. Number two, in my presentation, I touched upon this economic equality simply because of my personal experience in the Soviet Union and of my experience here in the United States, when so many people are afraid of the so-called redistribution of wealth. The redistribution of wealth to them is like the work of the devil. And yes, Abdul Baha confirms that. He says that the complete equality is impossible. In fact, complete equality will bring evil to society. And that's why I especially emphasized the fact that the teaching about economic inequality is not about redistribution of wealth, but about abolishing the extremes of wealth and poverty, which means that the substance of Baha'u'llah's vision is the creation of the global middle class. So when you limit the extreme wealth and the extreme poverty, naturally you end up with the middle ground, with moderation in economics. And moderation in economics means the creation of the global middle class. I think this is extremely important for economists when they discuss possible new economic models, because without the steady middle class, people who are financially independent, especially from the state organizations, unless you have those people who are financially independent and therefore could affirm their points of view on various matters without being afraid of punishment, you cannot have a normal, just society. People should be independent and should have the ability to express their views freely. So the creation of the global middle class is an enormous task that we will be confronting in this century even. I looked at different charts. What does it mean to belong to middle class in the United States? What does it mean to belong to the so-called global middle class? There are some statistics about that. How do we define middle class, etc.? I think this is one of the central questions for new economics, because if we do have a stable global middle class, that may serve as a prerequisite for establishing a peaceful global society. However, I should emphasize that the economic foundation, the middle class, is necessary but not sufficient condition, obviously, for establishing the lesser peace. That's all I can say. I'm sorry.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. It's very appreciated. Definitely, there's a lot to be discovered and understood as humanity researches ways to address the problems that we are having, of course. And I mean, there are some problems that exist that have been brought up from, for example, environmental ethicists. The idea of the tragedy of the commons. It's something that people can read who are watching today. It's short work by, I think, Garrett Hardin, where the concept that there is a common area for everyone to use, be it for a pasture, for raising their livestock, and there has to be some kind of system in place so that you don't overuse the common property for the commons. It's interesting because one point that some people may bring up against a global middle class, which of course I am for such a global middle class, but one point people may bring up against it is that if people were to live the way that Americans do, it would be unsustainable for the whole planet to continue as it is.
Yeah.
So there definitely needs to be a reimagining of how we live our lives, what is considered moderation, what is considered excess. Of course, what is hopefully considered austerity, which we avoid as well. So there's a new medium, new moderation that we need to understand how to live in harmony with our environment, a clean environment, and not just one where everyone has the same thing that people have in another place. I do want to ask a question now about this equality before the law that you had mentioned. And this is very interesting because a lot of different cultures have, of course, been upset. In the past, in literature, you'll find that people who were considered wealthy would be above the law, or someone who had more means was above the law. What do you think as a reimagining of this concept of those who are performing a function, not to be above the law, but hypothetically they are immune from being questioned in the same way that a normal person is? I'll bring up in the concept of America, we have immunity that is granted to, be it qualified, immunity that is granted to people who are doing a certain job. It ranges from police officers, it goes to prosecutors who are lawyers that are functioning on behalf of the state to put someone in jail or keep them there. And it goes, of course, all the way to different areas of government, even up to, if we have one, a monarch. So this concept of sovereign immunity, this concept of immunity from certain prosecution, if they are performing the law. And you may know there's a concept of eminent domain, where you can, in some countries, without compensation, take the land and give it to the monarch. Or in America, the concept that it's for the people, you take the land and you pay what's fair compensation for that land that you then, without the opportunity for potentially even negotiation or an option to say, hey, can you look somewhere else? They'll take the land and it belongs to the people then. So what do you think, where it, of course, equal before the law, where do you think that ends? Do you think that in the concept of creating laws to have exceptions to certain circumstances, it would be valuable? Or does equal before the law mean that there's, again, this egalitarian mindset that everyone in any function they perform, they are equally susceptible to being reviewed in the same way that a normal person would be?
Look, again, this is a very specific question about the legal system. Equality before the law is the main principle we should strive toward. But every principle or every rule has exceptions. I personally probably would not be a complete egalitarian. There may be some exceptions, certain circumstances, especially when it comes to national security, probably, or some other things. But I was always surprised that, let's say, American presidents, while they are presidents, are immune from, let's say, being interrogated and things like that. Personally, I think this is wrong. So it doesn't matter what kind of position, social position you have within the state. People should not be immune from prosecution, from interrogation, no matter who you are and what you are doing. That's my personal view. But there may be some other instances where there may be some exceptions from the general rule of equality. But let me say, equality is proclaimed, but it is not always followed. We are trying to have equality before the law, but in various countries, this equality may be partial, or this equality may not exist at all. Thinking about Russia, for example. So I think it is better, well, if we're talking about the global level, it is better to concentrate on changing and adjusting the legal systems around the world before we, drastically change anything in the United States. The United States is working more or less fine with certain ups and downs. But in many countries, equality before the law is simply a dream.
Thank you for presenting that perspective. So the concept of this equality before the law, even as it's seen in America, is not per se seen the same way in many places where people are not even afforded that. Those who are of a lower economic status are sometimes unjustly treated in a way that the law would not allow for if they were given the opportunity to be viewed under the auspices of the laws of their country. That makes a lot of sense. And thank you as well for commenting on the point that that there is a need for this equality before the law as it relates to people in different functions. I do, and I know you made your comment on, but I do want to ask one point though, and this is maybe rhetorical, but the idea is where we talk about everyone, even presidents, being subject, say, to being prosecuted under the laws. There is a need for people to perform unpopular actions where it is still their function to perform it. So sometimes people will be having to make the tough call that requires a lot of courage. It requires a lot of thought and foresight, and it will not be viewed as a popular thing to do at the time it's done. And we can think of many examples in history. One of the most popular examples for America, where we can say as a country here that we appreciate, is that we have Alaska. Alaska was purchased from another country, and at the time that Alaska, yes, exactly, from Russia. And at the time Alaska was purchased, the person who advocated for and was the principal architect of this transaction was ridiculed. It was called a folly, because the person that did so, yes, it was a very large amount of land, but he bought effectively on behalf of the USA land that was considered unvaluable. It was considered garbage, useless.
Yeah.
But now, as history has gone ahead in time, that decision, though not in his life to be known that he's to be vindicated, it has vindicated him many times over. It is a extremely wealthy land that America is very happy to have. But this is a very non-problematic example of a situation where today we view it as a very beautiful thing to have it as a part of a country now, but back in the past, it was considered a waste. And that's kind of the point here, is that sometimes you'll have people who are in positions that make difficult decisions, and those decisions will sometimes land them years and years of ridicule. And if you have a system where everyone can just be targeted for prosecution for, again, the same things, they could end up in jail doing the right thing.
Yes,
it's problematic.
It is possible. It is problematic, and there will always be cases when people should choose whether to do the right thing and be punished, or to do the wrong thing and be rewarded. That is the nature of the world. God always gives us the ability to choose, and hopefully we should choose the best thing in spite of all the repercussions. I don't think we will be able to create an ideal system in which everything will work smoothly, because Abdul Baha says, and again, I don't remember the exact work, where he talks about free will and morality and freedom of human will to choose good and evil. He says he was asked about evil, and he says that
probably some answer questions about those.
Evil. He said that evil will always exist. I think that is a very important point to remember. we will not be able to eliminate evil. In fact, enforced goodness, heaven as an enforced goodness, always turns into hell. The main cause of evil is in the fact that different worlds are coexisting with each other. The world of the physical matter and the world of the spiritual, they coexist with each other. They are not compatible with each other, and therefore they always produce tension. And this tension we view as something that is evil. So harmonious society of the future, for me, does not equal society in which evil will be eliminated and everything will be great. No, I think we will do actually very good if we are able to eliminate war. I think that will create a great progress for the human race.
Very beautiful words. Very well said. Eliminating war. That is definitely the goal of this present few centuries.
Yeah, maybe millennium. We'll see.
So do we have any other further questions from the audience for today?
Yeah. When we have this pause, I would like to ask the moderator to keep all the comments from chat room and maybe transport them to YouTube. When you have a place for comments.
Jeremiah, can you do that for us? The comments that are here in the Zoom that we have Lodro Searing, who has made some interesting comments as well, that we can make sure it's published. Jeremiah is having trouble unmuting, but there we go. Jeremiah?
Yeah, we'll make the necessary adjustments. The reality is that it's best if people want to make comments on the social media that they make the comments themselves directly. If people want to ask questions, and then we can forward these discussions back to the speaker, or the best outcome is possibly having Michael go directly to the social platforms themselves and respond to those. But we'll come up with a best case scenario that works for everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and as Jeremiah mentioned, it would be great to, so we have who it's coming from, and it's posted, not coming from, of course, the Clearwater Bahais, but from the actual commenters, that you also paste those comments on the YouTube or Facebook videos that you're watching. Of course, they're not interchangeable, so you'll need to comment in both places if you want it to be seen by both audiences on Facebook and or on YouTube. That being said, we are at our time for closing for today. We wanted to, Jeremiah and I and the Clearwater Bahais, we wanted to thank you, Doctor, for joining us today. We really appreciated that we're able to finish your presentation on this second part. And first and foremost, we thank everyone who has joined us here on the Zoom in attending and contributing your points and also just participating with us as we learned here together. And also all of you who are watching on YouTube and on Facebook, we invite you to comment with your questions. We will be monitoring and after the fact trying to respond as well, either through us, Dr. Sergeyev will respond, or he'll be able to respond himself to the videos. Either way, we really appreciate your feedback, and we look forward to perhaps new ideas for what to discuss moving forward. Again, thank you for your time, everyone. We hope you have a wonderful Sunday afternoon, this August 28th.
Thank you. Thank you.